Hello everyone, we're going to be doing this idol inspired glam. I'm trying to look like Lily Rose Depp. Do I look like her? Not really, but I'm trying, and I'm trying to get the general vibe, especially in the scene where they were like, now cry, now laugh, now be sad. That is the look that we're copying today, and we're also going to go into a deep dive of the 6 parent types that I saw with my own eyes at the Troubled Teen Centers. I just want to talk about kind of like the spectrum of the type of parent who utilized the Troubled Teen Institute that I went to. There are many TTIs, and there are probably many more parent types than this, but this is what I noticed at my school, and I want to get into the nitty-gritty of it and talk some trash. So if you want to see how we got this look and also be a part of this conversation, then just keep watching. This is going to be more chit-chat on this parent type than it is talking about the makeup, but I will have every product that I'm using listed below. I'll try to put it in order, or it will be tagged. So if you have any questions or any comments or any requests for a specific type of video, let me know. And if not, just keep watching. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I adore you. I love you. Thanks for being here. Today, we're gonna do the Jocelyn makeup look from The Idol. This is how I wanna look today. She always looks kind of sweaty and messy, which is, you know, it's kind of the vibe around here. I like to be a little bit more matte, but inside I always feel sweaty and messy, so we're gonna do it. I curled my hair like hers, but I'm gonna have it tucked away for now. And most importantly, we're going to talk about the 6 types of parents at the School for Troubled Girls. This is me profiling what I noticed in the families who brought their children in to the Troubled Teen Center that I went to as a teenager. So without further ado, we're gonna jump right into it. This is going to be storytime style, so a little bit less of the makeup lesson, if you will, and a little bit more on the trauma and the types of parents, and also kind of how the children suffer. And some of the different parent types will be kind of like married to one another, divorced from one another. This is just my take on that. And I thought it would be fun to talk a little trash. So let's get right into it. I'm going to start with my base a little bit because I feel like her base was always like pretty understated, so I'm just going to begin with that. Usually I would not begin with the base, but it just seems kind of like the smart thing to do in this situation. So let's talk about the first parent type. And this is the high-profile evangelicals. So both Steve Hill and Jim Bakker brought their daughters in the same time that I was there. And these are very, very famous evangelicals. There's a documentary on Hulu called Tammy Faye, and that's about Jim Bakker's late wife. And Jim Bakker and Steve Hill both adopted children and brought them to the Troubled Teen Centers. I have another category of parents, which they are a part of, but they're more a part of the high-profile evangelicals than they are the adoptees, just because that was like their identity. So they both had bio children as well, and they only placed the adopted children in the homes, which I think is interesting, while the adopted children could have been acting out from trauma, from SA, adoptive trauma. I don't know what their families were like before they were adopted or how young they were adopted. I know that one of the daughters was adopted as an older age, so she probably had more trauma and grief in life. But that being said, if a child is acting out because of trauma, I think the best thing to do is get to the root of that trauma. But these were people who couldn't be seen like with bad children because they were famous televangelists. These are household names. So Jim Bakker is known for his TV programs, and he was still on TV until somewhat recently even. He might still be to this day. Also, I know this is scary. This is just a little underpainting because Lily is bronzy, but you can't really see where the makeup stops and starts. It's kind of dewy and smudgy, so I wanted to bronze first. And then back to Jim Bakker. So he had a famous television show. You can Google him and you'll find tons and tons of footage. Then there was Steve Hill, who was known for the Brownsville revival. He is a quote-unquote revivalist, and he's really famous for just knocking people out in the spirit and saying, "Fire!" And I talk about this in short sometimes, but I never disclosed his name because I thought maybe it's disrespectful to like narc on his daughter like that. But then I thought about it more and like it's his legacy. I mean, he's a household name. So I don't think it's common knowledge that he dropped his kids off in the troubled teen industry. He is now deceased. May he rest in peace. Jim Bakker also did some prison time, mind you, but I'm pretty certain he's out. I think he went to prison like twice. So anyway, so you already know my stance on adopting children and then dropping them off at the TTI, but this was more shameful than usual, I think, because these were men with a lot of power and a lot of money and a lot of resources, and I don't really understand why they would have dropped their children off at this center. I think it was more tucking these children away so that they could still be seen in the same light and not look like failures as parents. So I would encourage you to look up these men, very powerful, rich men who probably benefited from adopting the children. I know that Jim and Tammy Faye had like tons of adopted children. And then when Tammy Faye died a long time ago, but then when I knew Jim, well, loosely, I mean, he was a parent at the school. I didn't know him that well, but he was married to Lori Baker. And among the two of them, they had like tons of adopted kids. So I think it's probably brought a lot of positive media attention to them to adopt all these children, but they were giving them up to the TTI. So yeah, so that's one profile type, the high profile evangelicals. There were more of these. Sometimes they were a little bit more like small towny, but these are two really prominent ones, two really quite famous ones that were in the time that I was there personally. So now let's go into the parents of adoptees. This is one of the biggest groups besides the next ones. So parents, we've already talked about the high income adoptees whose ministries profit from taking these children in. But now let's talk about kind of like the small time ones. There were a lot of parents, honestly, to cover. There was a lot of normal families with adopted kids, like more than anyone else. I'd say like sometimes like 30 to 50% of a dorm would be adopted. So this type of parent group was like super common. It was usually older white couples that would take in a child from like the Ukraine, Russian, Haiti, the US. Some of the girls were like adopted within the country, but a lot of them were from foreign countries. And after the parents experienced issues with that child that related to various traumas, scarcity, abandonment, SA, a lot of the kids were really thoroughly abused before coming into their family and probably had more trauma than most people that they needed to heal from. They were in these families and the families would bring them in and intensify those fears of abandonment, confirm that they are rejected by a second family, and re-traumatize them. I also talk about the negligent type, but I think that this type is also extremely negligent. I cannot imagine going to so many ends to acquire a child and then giving them up when things get tough and when that child feels comfortable enough to kind of like act out in an unhealthy way. I think there are literally so many ways to handle it that aren't dropping the kids off in the TTI. And some of the youngest girls were also adoptees. The one girl that I talked about in the last video, the 12-year-old who I kind of did a deep dive on, she was parents of older adoptive white parents, and she was from either Russia or Romania. There was one girl who was brought in at 17 and her family never returned. They lived in Germany and they never came back from visits. So they brought her here and then they just never came back, never visited. I think in the time that she was there, which is about 2 years, she said she had 1 or 2 family visits, whereas usually you would have about 6. She only had a couple at the most. And obviously she also was adopted. So can you imagine just feeling that rejected by your adopted family? Many times these families feel like it's God's calling on them to adopt multiple children from other countries and kind of spread the ministry by spreading it to real people and acquiring them like trophies and giving themselves like a good pat on the back. But then it's like they acquire these children and they get into the deep end and they can't swim. They don't know what to do. A lot of the time they're older because not that many young parents can afford to adopt, or they have never dealt with the issues that adopted or like foster kids have gone through. So much abuse happens, so many horrible things happen to these children. And then these white Christian families who are born and raised in the church, in the boonies, in the South, they don't know how to deal with this. They've never dealt with this in their lives before. So then the children get dumped. And the thing about it too is that when you're involved in the church and you tell them, you disclose that you're bringing your child into Teen Challenge, which is what the umbrella of this ministry is called, everybody pats them on the back. So these ministers who are so self-righteous and think they're called for something great, they're called to collect all these children, are being applauded by their communities and their church members, etc., for dropping their kids off, especially in the South. In the North, maybe not so much because people have less religious ties and different ways of life, especially church-wise. There's just not that same church culture in the North or in the far West or whatever, but these parents are being applauded for abandoning and neglecting their adopted children who already have all this trauma, rejection, etc. It's really cruel. Let's go to the next parent group. I'm going to be doing my eyeliner while I talk about this, so good luck to me. Let me do this and then I'll talk about the next group. Okay, now the next group is the negligent and afraid Christians. These are usually people who are born into the religion, raised in the church. Whether they are living by the Bible or not, they still have this fear at their core and they are afraid for their children's souls. So I had one parent like this, and it was my mom, and she is still afraid for my soul. Now, what I'm going to say here about these types, it doesn't necessarily apply to my mom, but some of it does. Not all of it, but some of it. So whether they're living by the Bible or not, they still have this intense fear and anxiety about their child's soul, even more so than they have about their own soul, which is very interesting. I think it's easier to control somebody else than to deal and worry about your own salvation. So these are people with heightened levels of anxiety and fear centered around religion, life, death, etc. They likely have a bunker to camp out in and stores of food and water for extended periods of time. These are parents who feel that it's important to save their children's souls above all else. Many times with parents like these, the fundamentals of a safe, calm, and loving home are missing. So then when you're just focused on the afterlife and you don't worry about pretty much anything else, weird shit happens. Usually children go neglected in some way emotionally, physically. They don't get the nurturing that they need or the patience or the love. They get everything within a religious context and that's about it, because that's all the parent can really handle. These parents might not ask their child how they're doing, but instead ask what they learned about in church. The church is the parent, and this parent is feeble and afraid and nervous and anxious, and they want the church to be the parent because honestly, they can't handle doing this on their own. The troubled teen industry profits from this parent's fear, and this parent is the type who will allow the TTI to keep their child forever. This parent will not ask critical questions, will not investigate, generally very negligent, just negligent, okay? But under the context of religion, which is also just strange. To this parent, adding the child time in the program is no worries as long as it will save the child's soul. It's kind of like how I was there for so long because nobody was concerned about like my emotional well-being. They were very concerned about my spiritual well-being and my path with God. And they thought, well, if this is God's plan for you, you should stay there. Like that's how my parents felt. Now, I mentioned negligence, and I think the negligence of this parenting style is the worst thing about it. Because when you allow somebody else, like the church or an organization or a TTI, to parent your child, it's just really unhealthy and scary dynamics can happen. Think about the type of adults who surrender their children to Scientology and let the Scientologists raise them in camps. This is very similar to that. They are so afraid that they will obey somebody else's authority. They don't need to exercise their own. They don't even feel like they have it. I don't think parents like this have the confidence to do something about it if they needed to. So I'm just going to use that nude shade over that cream color. We're also going to take our brown shadow. This is Rye from Hourglass and what I used earlier, and we're just going to run that into the lower lash line, and then we're going to go into the fourth type of parent. And this next type of parent was one half of my family's dynamic. So let's get into the authoritarian parents. So these are parents who will use religion to execute their plans of control. They may or may not even believe in it, but they certainly use it to run a tight ship. Usually authoritarian parents have no problems with corporal punishment, much like my father when I was a child. He would use what he needed, and he would even quote the Bible to perpetuate his narrative, all while being the worst Christian ever. Many times, parents like these have created a myriad of problems in their families and with their children. And when the teenager rebels, it is not connected to that parent. They do not see why that happened. They just see that their child is acting out and they need to bring them back under submission. Parents like these will double down on their wayward teen just to continue to exercise control and authority over them. I'm actually going to go ahead and do these off camera and be right back. Okay, I'm back with the lashes on, and I touched up my concealer because it was getting a little bit muddy from the shadow kind of falling onto it, which is why I usually do the eyes second. But let's get back into the authoritarian parent style. So by the time that the child is around teenage years and is rebelling against their parents because of the way that they've been treated, I mean, also teenage rebellion is perfectly normal and it's a part of discovering oneself. But when this happens, the corporal punishment, the cruel treatment, the all or nothing parenting style is not accounted for, and everything is blamed on the child, and that is usually when they get themselves trapped in a troubled teen program. The teen could not succeed from the influences at home in the first place. And so this parenting style really sets them up for failure. Of course, at one point in everybody's life, you have to take responsibility for it. But I had a father like this, and I did rebel against it. And in my adult years, when I was free of these influences, I never had another problem in my life. The teen can't succeed under this parenting style and then is further punished. So this is a teen who's already been punished at home, and at some point they just don't care anymore. So then the parent usually uses a TTI to further punish their child in a more extreme way, which is why I got sent. It was a form of extreme punishment. This parent type was usually a father. It could be a mother, but it was usually a father, and the mother was usually kind of like this parent type's submissive. Usually they would be married to the negligent and afraid, or the basket case kind of personality, or divorced from either one of those two women, Or it could be that the woman is the authoritarian and the father is kind of her submissive and her fearful neglective and her version of the basket case. Lily has kind of unruly brows. She's got thicker brows than me, so I'm going to fill mine in a little bit more, but I'm not going to go to the same fullness that she has because it looks a little bit mousy on me. So in most cases, when it is the parent as an authoritarian leader, usually his wife is his submissive and he uses the same tactics on the wife that he does the children. This was true in my home in that he would say things like, wives submit to the husbands, children obey their parents, spoil the rod, spare the child. Just that kind of energy is the authoritarian parent. And this was another one of the most common because this was a very extreme punishment. So of course we saw a lot of men who had this style of parenting and who used religion to control the family. This parent type, like I said before, uses religion to play out these narratives. It doesn't even mean that they are very religious or that they are a good Christian. Usually they're actually the worst ever, but they might take snippets of the Bible to do what they need to do to control their family and feel important at home. These people thrive on other people feeling small. My dad used to humiliate me as a child in front of my friends. It was to make me feel small. There was no other reason for that. He would yell at me, make me get on my knees and scrub something in front of a playmate in a totally innocent time. Just really weird stuff like that. Classic authoritarian. My dad has changed in his old age. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because he truly has made a turnaround, because he loves me, or because he cannot get away with that anymore because he will be slaughtered by me and my sisters and his ex-wife. The tables have turned. If you look at the Bible in a certain light, it is terrifying, and the authoritarian parent uses that to their advantage. They use those fear tactics on their wives and on their children, or on their husbands and on their children. It can be reversed, but in the church especially, there's a lot of men like this who take snippets of the Bible, and the Bible really favors men, and that's why I think there's more men like this in the church than anywhere else. Also, Lily Rose is extremely blushy, so I use this hot pink. This is hot to touch. These ColourPop, I use them all the time, and sometimes they're sold out, sometimes not, so I'll link it. And underneath this, I did the glassy blush. Of course, you guys, I will link everything and type out everything. There's two more parent types, so let's get through it. Next up is the small-time ministers. They're always smiling, always making dad jokes, kind of innocent. They're like the Christian granolas. They are delusional. They're not evil. They are delusional. One family was vegan. They brought their daughter in. She was eating meat in a matter of days and continued to for the rest of her program, obviously. I can't believe that they brought her into that program, but I don't know how much they knew about it, but I guess they thought it was worth it because, of course, they would have eventually found out about it, whether it be months later or weeks into her program. I'm sure she mentioned it, but you're not allowed to complain, so she probably had to mention it in a very delicate way to even tell them at all. I guess if it was a matter of her soul, that's what was most important to them. These are really like cheesy types of Christians. Like I said, kind of goofy personalities, goofy smiles, traveling ministers, probably do a lot of mission work. I'm going to use the Uoma pencil for my lips because I feel like it looks a lot like Lily Rose's color. This is Angelo by Uoma. They usually had modest clothes, big families, really active in church, if not church leaders. Though they are delusional, they usually aren't abusive, and they usually truly believe in what the Bible says. They're not like the authoritarian who doesn't really believe what they're saying. These people are in the thick of it. They maybe have been born into it, or some could be recent converts. The new converts are usually especially extreme in their Christian faith because they have something to prove. Think about the show. Have you guys seen Welcome to Plathville? That family, those parents actually became that religious on their own. They they weren't raised the way that they raised their kids. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a TV show. I believe it's on TLC, Discovery Plus, something like that. Actually, maybe Hulu. I don't know. It's on TV. Welcome to Plathville. And it is about a family who homeschools their children on a compound, and they pretty much have very little contact with the outside world. They have like 12 kids, and they raise them in an extremely Christian and conservative environment. And their kids don't know who Kim Kardashian is. They are extremely limited in technology. They homeschool. They don't have regular experiences in life. And like I said, while these people aren't evil or necessarily abusive, they are mixed up, and usually because of their own trauma. Because if you think about Kim, who is the mom in Welcome to Plathville, she said that she raised her children this way because she experienced SA in her childhood, and she wanted to keep an eye on her children, keep them safe and keep them sheltered from the world. So I think a lot of these families like this are really, truly projecting. Like, their family didn't allow sugar, but they did allow like wholesome fun, outdoorsy activities, building things. They didn't have such an emphasis on school, but they had a huge emphasis on like learning, whether that be like the kids getting jobs and working on cars and stuff like that, like doing things with their hands. I'm going to use my L'Oreal lip palette for this lip look because it seemed like she had a pale nude. I think this one will be good. This lip palette is fucking awesome. These are so good. This palette is supreme. Okay, so I'm going to use that top color there to start. Lily's was more matte, and this shade is matte. Some are glossy. It's such a good variety-filled palette. Okay, so there are a lot of ways that this type of family seems normal, innocent, and happy, but if you really look into it, the parents are usually led by their mental illness, on their own unhealed traumas, just like Kim projecting, and they're desperate to protect their children from the evils of the world. So they would see it as worth it to drop their daughter off in a troubled teen camp with strangers because in their mind, they're about the saving of her soul, and they kind of have this hunky-dory outlook on life, like, she'll be fine, blah, 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 blah. They show up, they make jokes, they're always looking to teach a lesson in kind of a punny way. They might even be offered to speak at the graduations or at the chapel services with all the families there. These are parents who are likely still in contact with their children today and who also likely have children who are still affiliated with this religion. A lot of the girls with parents like this, they are still Christians and still have like little Bible verses in their social media accounts and stuff. I'm going to go over my lip liner again, but I think this looks like a lot like Lily Rose's lip. And then we're going to go over the last personality type, which is the basket case. So this is usually like a childlike parent, usually a single parent or like divorced from the authoritarian. This type of parent is easily convinced by the TTI. These are parents who need to be parented themselves. They personally need intervention and use their child as a family scapegoat. The child of this parent is likely independent, successful, self-sufficient, can meet their own needs, and probably have a rebellious streak as well, thus landing them in the TTI. The child has learned to be this way and to meet their own needs. The parent is pretty unreliable, usually late to family meetings, which are very important, and they don't happen often. So if you're taking it seriously, you're there, but these parents were often late, missing hours of time, of very limited time with their children. This parent type is emotional. They're easily manipulated by the TTI, but they also have kind of like a stubbornness and childlike sense about them as well. So sometimes they will actually remove their children from the TTI. There was this girl named Mindy, and she was my little sister, and she went to the program twice. And when my older sister was in the program, she was her little sister as well. So she was both of our little sisters. She got admitted twice. She had a mom who's kind of irresponsible, childlike, etc. She took her out the first round, and then she brought her back a couple years later, and that's when I met her. So she knew me and my sister, and her parent was just like this. Kind of similar to the fearful and afraid, but not as religious themselves. Many times also this parent gets saved on campus. There were several parents that their daughters would always kind of pray for and bring up in family meetings and chapel services, saying that my mom isn't saved. And then sometimes this parent would make a big spectacle about getting saved on campus, and then Lord knows what happened after that. Like I said, this parent themselves needs intervention, and they're kind of like reaping the rewards of the program itself as well, like the religious aspect and being told what to do and being kind of parented by these people, even though they may rebel against the program themselves later. This parent needs a parent, usually married and possibly divorced to authoritarian, like I said. And also, this parent finds comfort in the structure of the boarding school. This parent themselves needs structure, and they are participating in being helped by the center. The child, like I said before, is the scapegoat. Maybe the child legitimately rebelled, maybe they didn't, but they have a very loose structure at home and they are responsible for their parents' salvation, emotional needs, etc. The success of the family is relying on this child to be good and not the parent to create a stable home. So yeah, that was the last parent type, and this is our look. Like I said, I curled my hair with a large barrel. You know, the larger the barrel, the more it's kind of like a loose wave or whatever. And Lily's hair was always, it was obviously curled, but it was always fallen out. And I think she has like thin, fine hair. So I'm assuming that they did this style again and again with the heat iron just to give it a little bit of body. She usually curls in towards the face. I kind of tried to do that, but it kind of fell out. So yeah, this is our look, and that is the profiles of the parents who invest in the TTI. There are other types of parents as well, but this is just what I noticed and what I came up with, and it's just my bullshit as per usual. So I appreciate you guys watching. I hope you found this one interesting. Say a little prayer for the kids with these parents right now who are suffering at Columbus Girls Academy and other programs as well. Also, this parent type of the TTI, these are what I saw at my TTI. So I didn't go to Wilderness. I went to an extremely structured, quote unquote, therapeutic boarding school for troubled teens. So it was a little bit different from Wilderness, but it was also similar in a lot of ways. Almost all of these camps have a religious theme, and some are more or less centered on that. Mine was extremely centered on that, so much so that I found it to be extremely cult-like. So yeah, let me know what you think about this in the comments below. If you are a survivor, let me know what parent type you had. And if you have any questions or comments or any ideas or anything that you'd like me to cover that I haven't already covered, then let me know, because I'd be happy to cover it. These are things that I think you'll find interesting, but if you guys could tell me what you find interesting, then you know I will give it to you. Also, one more thing, some of you guys have been questioning where you sign up for the membership, because I keep mentioning the membership and you're saying that you don't know how to join. Underneath this video here, it should say a little join thing, join. Anywhere it says join, that's where you join. If not, you go to my profile and I'll toggle it here so that you can kind of see a little walkthrough, but that's how you join. And also you don't have to join. So yeah, but if you want to, I just give like little extra snippets and rants, and it's a little bit more like uncut and unedited, even maybe unprofessional. These are stories that I like to keep separate. Maybe I'm talking about a guy who still follows me. Maybe I'm talking about a client, who knows? So if you want to join, be my guest. I would love to have you. And again, thank you for getting ready with me.